Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Amerlin Study. I'm Jess, your Amerlin seat, and today we are going to be going over the first 5 chapters of Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. Dinniman? I think? So let's do it. You know what? Let me look and make sure that I have his name right. Okay, I did have it right. I did have it right. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Instead of reacting to a show or a movie, we're going to be going over book. We're going to be going over book. Today, we read book. I'm a fucking idiot. This is weird. The fact that we're not getting ready to watch a show for some reason is throwing me off my game, and it's terrible. So, anyway, I can't stop fidgeting. Okay. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We are going to be going over a book. I'm gonna, I used to really love reading. I used to be a voracious. What in the fuck? I used to be a voracious reader. I used to plow through books like fucking crazy. And then I don't know what happened. I blame it at least partially on smartphones. They're just they're dopamine machines. And, I've been raw dogging ADHD for most of my life, and I'm probably burnt out as well. And so I'm just I've been having a really hard time actually sitting down and reading anything other than romance novels, alien romance novels. A lot of them. I've read a lot of them. But other stuff I just really haven't done. And I've mentioned this before. I promised my best friend Laura that I would read the Red Rising series, and I'm part of the way through the first book, but I haven't gotten any farther because I have trouble sitting down and reading in general. And then that book, it's dark. I don't know if you all have read Red Rising, but that shit's dark. I was fuck. I was maybe 60 pages in and I was crying, weeping. And my husband's like, what is the matter with you? And I'm just it's just so sad. I don't cry at stuff. When I was 17 years old, I was with a bunch of my theater friends, many of whom are adults, and who are still dear, dear friends of mine. And we watched Steel Magnolias somewhere, and I didn't cry at the end of it. Because, quite frankly, I don't feel bad for Shelby. Girl, you knew going in. The doctor fucking told you, if you have a kid, it'll fucking kill you. And she went and she did it anyway. I'm supposed to feel bad about that? And my friend Donnie called me a heartless wench. So, I don't cry at things, as a general rule. But I was weeping by that point in the book. And I think it was around page 60. I don't know. If you've read it, you probably know the part that I'm thinking of. So, yeah, anyway, reading. I haven't done a lot of it. And I promised Laura I would read Red Rising. I haven't gotten very far. She read the entire Wheel of Time series because she knew it was important to me. So I really need to get my shit together and get that read. But anyway, point being, I'm hoping that by doing some book content here on my channel, it'll help to keep me not organized. My brain is partially offline right now, and I don't know what the fucking problem is. I'm hoping that it'll keep me accountable to actually, finishing books if I am making content from it. So that's what we're doing. And so what I have decided to do with this, because it took me a little bit to get started on this project because I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to format it. How does one have a book discussion by oneself? And so I decided that I would at least jump off by doing chapter synopses. And I'm pulling a format that I used to do when I was on a podcast called the White Tower Podcast. And we would do these very much truncated, unhinged, irreverent kind of synopses. We ended up calling them synapsasses because I we couldn't talk. So I decided to take that format to use for this. And I do it occasionally on my podcast, Star Valley After Dark, as well as Belladonna the Busty Bard. But I thought that would be a good jumping off point, and then just talking about the book and what I like about it. Because generally it's going to be stuff that I like about it, because I just like talking about things that I like. And I like liking things. So I assume that I will like this. And 5 chapters into Dungeon Crawler Carl, I like it very much. So let's go ahead and jump in to the synapsass of chapter 1. We're doing 5 chapters. That might end up being too much, but we'll see how it goes. So enough of that shit. Let's read a fucking book. Chapter 1. Lights up on a 27-year-old military vet named Carl, who just broke up with his girlfriend B because she cheated on him with her ex-boyfriend on a trip out of town. Classic. And he found out about it on Instagram. Also classic. He has a love-hate tolerate relationship with B's very fancy Persian cat, Princess Donut the Queen Anne Chunk, which, to be honest, is an excellent name for a cat, and it's because of this fancy cat that shenanigans ensue. Carl wakes up in the middle of the night craving a smoky treat, so having decided to give his ex-girlfriend the crooked finger by smoking indoors, but also having reached a compromise with Donut because she doesn't like the smoke, he cracks the bedroom window and lights up. It's at this moment that Donut discovers her tookish nature for the very first time and launches off Carl's shoulder and onto the tree outside the window, which is a very big problem because it's January and it's cold as balls in Seattle. In the interest of expedience, Carl forgoes actual clothing and runs outside in boxers, a leather jacket, and a pair of his ex's pink Croc sandals, as one does, to try and lure the cat inside. As anyone who has ever known a cat could predict, it goes about as well as you would expect, which is to say, poorly. And he's getting fussed at by his downstairs neighbor when, whoomp, the entire apartment building and every other structure around him collapses, flattens, straight into the ground. Everything's gone. Cars, streetlights, everything except bikes and a moped with a traffic boot on it. So we're on page 5 of the Kindle edition, and we're already off and rolling. It's at this moment that Donut decides to cooperate and jumps down into Carl's arms, and he hears a robotic voice inside his head, which is speaking a language he doesn't recognize but somehow understands, while simultaneously a bunch of foreign words float in the air in front of him, which he can't read but somehow can. The gist of it is that whoever is in charge of Earth didn't file the right paperwork on time with the aliens, I guess, as per subsection 543 of the Precious Elemental Reserves Code, which honestly shouldn't shock anyone, and the planet was seized to be mined for minerals. But they're not monsters. They are obviously going to comply with the Mined Material Reclamation Act and subsection 35 of the Indigenous Planetary Species Protection Act, which means that if you want to try your luck on a planet that is now devoid of shelter and most resources, you're absolutely welcome to do so, but you forfeit your rights to all your shit. Otherwise, you can crawl the dungeon and get your shit back. So generous. Itch. There's a lot of other stuff about how the dungeon works, how it's made out of the 99.999999% of material left on the planet that the presumed and alleged aliens don't want, which is totally above board and not at all horrifying. There are 18 levels. The number of entrances to each level reduces by half as you go. You need to find a guild to teach you what the fuck is going on. You know, standard shit. And Carl's head is swimming, but he's also freezing his ass off. So he hauls said frozen ass to the nearest dungeon entrance with Donut in tow. So right off the bat, we have established a really unique take on the apocalypse. That the aliens or whoever it is that have done this have created a scenario where people are basically obligated to go into these dungeons because there is no place for them to hole up and mount any kind of resistance. There really isn't any good place for anybody to go and start forming communities to try and build the world back up or anything like that. Especially in the Northern Hemisphere where it's cold at this point in time because it's January. People are obviously going to head to the dungeons because they're going to freeze. They'll die. So, in a kind of sick and twisted way, it's kind of genius. You are absolutely guaranteed that people are going to come in here because there's literally no place else for them to go. So, yeah, right off the bat, 1 chapter in, and I'm hooked. Well done, Mr. Dinneman. You crushed it, bud. Chapter 2. Carl moves down an ornate staircase covered in weird carvings. It's warm, but it's weird. Donut is perched on his shoulder like a little cat parrot, a carrot, if you will. And they are literally the only beings there out of a city of like 1 million, but that's not really a huge surprise since all the buildings collapse at like 2:30 a.m. Asia is really where you would want to be in this scenario, or maybe somewhere in Europe. Carl is looking at this ornately carved stairway and shit and is like, literally, who the actual fuck? By the time he gets to the bottom of the stairs, it's like 80 degrees and humid, which frankly is too much for my Yankee ass, if we're being honest. And there's this big fuck off door. And lo and behold, a fucking tooltip, of all things, pops up when he's looking at the door. And it tells him that the design on the door is supposed to be the dominant species of the Borant system, whoever and whatever the fuck that is. But evidently there will be a test later. So we have that to look forward to. Carl familiarizes himself with the gaming interface a bit as he opens the door and starts down a big fuck-off hallway, and Donut bites him in the hand, so he'll let her down because of course she does. And let me tell you that he probably wants to find a healer because I can say from experience that cat bites fucking suck. But Donut runs a bit down the hall and is also familiarizing herself with the gaming interface if her frantic paw swiping is anything to go by. And a new voice is like, hey, welcome to the dungeon. We have fun and games. Welcome to the jungle. And the book says it sounds like a game show host, and I immediately thought of Guy Smiley from Sesame Street, and I'm not sure why I went to Guy Smiley, because you would have thought that I would go to like Pat Sajak or maybe the guy who calls people down on The Price is Right, but no, I went Guy Smiley. I don't know. The timer appears in the upper right corner of his vision, so it's basically like he's got on VR goggles, but he can't take them off, and that does seem totally cool and normal, and Carl is understandably unsettled. Carl realizes that he can sort of slash inspect other beings in the dungeon, so he finds out that Donut is crawler number 4119. She's level 1, she's a cat, and she has not yet chosen her class. I predict that depending on her personality, she's either going to be a tank of some kind or a rogue, and I am leaning tank at this point, if we're being really honest. Anyway, Carl then finds out that he is crawler number 4122. His crawler name is Carl, which is honestly kind of lame. Like, he should be able to pick something more clever than Carl, right? And he'll be able to choose a new race and class when he gets to level 3. Apparently, he has stats, which he can see in his stats menu, but of course they don't tell him where to find that. Then he gets a whole slew of fucking achievements and loot boxes. He's a trailblazing cat lady, so he gets a couple loot boxes for that. He gets achievements for having empty pockets and no pants, for not having any kind of weapon, and they call him Van Damme, which is hilarious. And he gets an achievement for coming in alone, and they're like, haha, you're gonna die, which frankly is not very sporting of them. Carl can't figure out how to open his stats menu, and he remembers that he's supposed to find a tutorial guild, so he and Donut hoof it down to this neon sign that says, "The Tutorial Guild," and he gets a new achievement for falling into an obvious trap because some lights flip on and 3 goblins on some kind of tractor grinder thing start chasing him. And I imagine it's like that thing that chased Sarah and Hoggle in Labyrinth. You know, you'll know what I'm talking about. Maybe I'll put a clip in here. He and Donut book it out of there and around a corner, and the Gobbo's machine gets hung up on that corner. Carl's tooltips helpfully tell him that the thing chasing him is a goblin murder dozer, and it's being driven by 2 level 2 goblins and a level 3 goblin engineer, which are evidently the incels of the goblin world and will attack female party members first. And to be perfectly honest, I cannot approve on that humor-wise. That is hilarious. And as they're running, Carl spots a much more inconspicuous sign for a tutorial guild, which triggers yet another achievement, and that's how Carl finds out that apparently he has a mini-map. So he has that going for him, which is nice. So we don't need to do a full blow-by-blow of what happens next, but suffice it to say that the master splinter-ass dude behind the door doesn't want to let them in, but Donut goes in anyway. Carl kills one of the 2 Gobbos who comes after him, while the 3rd Gobbo is trying to get the death tractor around the corner. He gets a whole slew of new achievements. He argues with Master Splinter about letting him in. Master Splinter just really wants him to get Donut out of there, but he finally lets Carl in, and he gives the remaining 2 Gobbos the double crooked fingers as they barrel by on their death tractor, and he slams the door. And thus endeth chapter 2. So yeah, now we are like another level into this, and I am enjoying the concept of it being like a video game. It's unsettling. It would be unsettling to have a VR headset like implanted in your brain. Like the only way that he can not see it is if he closes his eyes. And in the book, it says that he feels like kind of nauseous about it. And frankly, I don't blame him, because that would be weird. I don't like, from an overstimulation standpoint, having all of that stuff in your vision without being able to turn it off would be like hell for me. I would probably lose my mind. So that is all very interesting. But yeah, it's apparently, it's sort of like it's a combination of like a video game and LARPing and Dungeons and Dragons, but in like the worst way possible. In an apocalyptic way, which, yeah, Mr. Dinneman still has my attention on this one. So, Chapter 3. Carl's VR interface that is totally normal for him to have tells him that he's now in a tutorial guild hall, which is a safe zone, but the level timers are still counting down. Mordecai, which is Master Splinter's real name apparently, and also, can we just talk for a second about how much I am enjoying that Matt Dinneman in this book, like, looked at this rat dude that he created and was like, yeah, he looks like Master Splinter. I feel like that is a cultural reference that a very specific subset of the population is going to get. There is a very specific subset of like young Gen X and elder millennials, like that whole stretch, that are going to get that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reference. And I love that for us. And I feel like that also means that our good author falls in that demographic. And I love that for us too. I think that's really fun. I digress. Mordecai, which is Master Splinter's real name apparently, is super stressed out that he apparently bent the rules by letting Carl and Donut in. Mordecai is a non-combatant NPC, a rat hooligan, which is, and I quote, not as roided out as a rat brute or as I'm a fireball yo ass as a rat shaman. Rat hooligans offer the best of both worlds. Again, comedy-wise, I cannot top that. While Carl inspects the room and tries to open up some of the info boxes in his interface, Donut knocks over a vase with Mordecai's mother's ashes in it, which, again, is fairly classic feline. And Carl wants to know if the gobbles will be waiting for him when he goes back out. Morty says, yeah, they'll actually probably go home and bring back some friends, so that's a thing. So Carl is like, fuck, and he goes out to deal with that whole mess. The Death Tractor is currently stuck against a wall trying to drill through it, and I'm really not sure how the Goblin Engineer got his driver's license because he cannot seem to get his shit together. Carl climbs on top of the Death Tractor, and it's so loud that the two Gobbos don't even notice him. And he throws the level 2 guy into the spinning spikes, so he's mulch.
Oh my fuck, he got mulched!
The level 3 guy comes at him faster than he expects, and he tries to do a "you're in America, speak American" thing to try and burn this dude, but the Gobbo's like, you're speaking Syndicate Standard, dumbass. They put it in your brain. So that also apparently is a thing that has happened. Carl manages to knock the level 3 guy off the tractor to the ground and does a kind of AEW off the ropes flying curb stomp maneuver and pops that dude like a tube of toothpaste under a steamroller because, as it turns out, Carl is a big boy, TM. Carl does not love that he has had to do this, but he also needs to move his ass because he gets a tooltip that the Death Tractor is about to blow. He hauls ass back to the guild room and makes it in just before the fucker blows up. Morty is like, the fuck just happened? And Carl's like, Death Tractor exploded. While he was off fighting for his life, Donut took a shit in Morty's mother's ashes, which has Morty understandably upset, but he maintains his professionalism and explains that he too was a person displaced by the probable and alleged aliens, and once he got far enough into the dungeon, he opted to become a non-combatant NPC rather than keep going and possibly die, which seems eminently sensible to me. Apparently, he used to be some kind of bird person, but now he's a changeling and changes form every time his guild hall is moved. We learned that the probable and alleged aliens spend a lot of time studying a planet's people and culture so they can have real hip and trendy references and shit in their dungeons for authenticity. And Carl is like, what even the fuck is happening right now, for real? And Morty's like, dude, this is like the 7th or 8th human-seeded world that we've done this to, and every single one of you fuckers want to know why instead of just sucking up and getting on with it. And Carl is like, okay, run it back there real quick, big shooter. There are other human worlds? And Morty is like, okay, I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version, but you need to sit down. So we learn that there is a language called Syndicate Standard, whatever the hell that means, and it has somehow been injected into Carl's brain. And one wonders when that happened, because it had to have been like pretty much immediate. Because, like, the building's flattened, and then the voice came into his head with, like, the scrolling text almost immediately. So, like, was it some kind of, like, laser shooting microchip into everybody's head? Like, I mean, mostly they're romance novels, but I've read science fiction-y books where, like, you get a universal translator, but it's always some kind of, like, a chip that gets injected. and then usually has to like build neural pathways into your brain so that you can start to understand stuff. But this is just sort of like they lasered some shit into his head or something. Like, this is incredible technology. So we also learn, like, sort of world building wise, that through the, like, we know there are 18 levels to the dungeon, and we know that Master Splinter got to level, I think he said 11, at which point he decided, like, he got the opportunity to do something other than fight his way through the dungeon. So he decided to do that, which again seems extremely sensible. I would probably consider taking a deal like that as well. So that's how he ended up there. So we learned that about the world, that you apparently will get an opportunity to do something else if you want to, which seems nice of them. And yeah, apparently also they've been observing humanity. They made a Van Damme reference. They're snarky as shit. Yeah, a little creepy to think about. So yeah, that's fun. Let's do chapter 4. In this chapter, we jump right into some real existential shit, because apparently there are 6 basic starter species that are seeded across the universe by the Syndicate, an organization name which sounds totally cool and above board, by the way. So they seed these worlds, keep an eye on them, initiate first contact, and then strip the planet of its resources. And they prep for this shit for years. First contact for Earth was actually back when the pyramids were built, but they had a backlog, so it took them until the 21st century to get around to it, which honestly seems on brand for any corporation. The, quote, advanced team has been on the planet since The Hobbit came out in the 30s, and then Morty came planet-side in 64. He even got to be a human for a little while, and he used that opportunity to steal a bunch of Bond videos from Blockbuster, which I honestly love that for him. So, anyway, Earth's number is up, and Borant has arrived to take our shit, but that's not even where the real money is. It turns out that the dungeons are broadcast as an intergalactic TV show, which Morty points out is more of a Running Man scenario than a Survivor scenario, and I, for one, appreciate his honesty. Carl is processing all of this, and he wonders if Bee survived because she'd always wanted to be on TV, but he figures that she was probably asleep in her hotel room in the Bahamas when it all went down, and even if she had, she wouldn't have gone into a dungeon. But then he shelves all that because sometimes we just can't deal with our trauma in the moment, you know? So Morty figures nobody else is going to be joining them, so he launches into the tutorial. There's a lot of shit that we don't need to detail here, but we get access to the menu, we learn how to navigate the interface, how to use the mini-map, which color dot is what. We find out that Carl can start changing stats and pick his race and class once he gets to the 3rd level, which is a calculated thing. They're trying to eliminate people by attrition, so they're not investing a whole lot of energy in people who are going to get KO'd right out of the gate. As far as Carl's stats go, turns out he's a little bit of a himbo with a strength of 6 and intelligence of 3, and he takes exception to that, citing that his idiot friend who peed on a cop's bike the other night. But Morty points out that it's actually wisdom that makes you not pee on the bike, and they don't give crawlers access to their wisdom because changing it apparently fundamentally changes their personality, and apparently that is where they draw the line with the whole thing. Carl has another processing moment about his idiot friend being dead, but right back on the shelf with that shit. Thank you very much. Then we get the rundown on ratings, views, followers, favorites, and patrons. You can't just run this dungeon, you need to run this dungeon with panache, baby. Get those ratings up so you can get patrons, which means better gear and a better chance of survival. With any luck, Carl will be featured on a highlight reel in the next day or so, which will give him significant boost. Best wishes for your dungeon influencer career, Carl. Hey guys, I'm Carl. Welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be unboxing a bronze benefactor box. Fucking... Important note. You can't talk shit about Borant Corporation or the Syndicate because they don't like that, especially when people are watching you. And if you do, your dungeon experience may be accelerated, which sounds cool. Further, dead is dead. There is no respawning. And finally, toilet paper is complimentary. There are restrooms all over the place because it turns out that people pissing and shitting all over the place is bad for ratings. I, for one, am shocked. The skills menu is a complete mess, and they have to filter the shit out of it because, believe it or not, it's not really useful to know that Carl has one skill point in operating his TV remote. On the 2nd floor, mobs start dropping gold, and on the 3rd floor, you can start shopping. There's a hot bar at the bottom of the interface, and that's really giving World of Warcraft to me. And Morty has Carl slot a little healing spell in there. And just as we're wrapping up, another voice comes on and announces that the dungeon is closed. Of the 13 million total people who entered, we're now down to 10 million. And entrances to the 2nd floor will not appear for another 30 hours. So that's neat. We also learn about the party menu and find out that apparently Donut is beefy enough to get her own crawler ID instead of being classified as a pet, so she and Carl are in a party together. We find out that this is Morty's last dungeon. Once it's over, he becomes a full citizen, whatever the fuck that means, and he can go anywhere he wants, except for his home planet, which is not open to him. And then we get the real kick in the nuts. Of the 18 levels in this dungeon, the deepest anyone has ever gotten is 13. He was a human from another human world, and he lasted all of 30 minutes on that level. So, hooray. Another big world building dump in this one. This is honestly really fascinating. We're diving into how the syndicate, like we find out about the syndicate, which, I mean, honestly sounds like the name of a mob. Like it sounds like what you would call a crime family. And I assume that that's intentional. But we find out about the syndicate, we find out about the Borant Corporation, and apparently they do these shows and different corporations sort of sponsor them. So it's Borant Corporation's turn. You cannot talk shit about any of them because then they'll make sure you die, which is super cool. And yeah, you need to make sure that you are getting a lot of likes and shares and shit because otherwise you're hooped. So yeah, big time, like with the understanding that like I am not an expert in world building by any stretch of the imagination. And I honestly, like I said, I don't read as much as I should. But it feels like the world building in this is really fast paced, but still thorough and really interesting. You know, we're only on chapter 4 and we have gotten so much shit laid out for us. And, you know, it's sort of like the Guildmaster tutorial kind of thing obviously kind of helps with that. It's sort of like a almost, for lack of a better way of putting it, like an omniscient being who is able to sort of like fill in all the blanks for you really quickly. You know, it is a trope, but I think it's well executed in this particular situation. So yeah, I like it. I'm into it. Yeah, really excited. So we'll move on to chapter 5. So then we just move on from that little truth bomb and start talking inventory. Morty explains that they've changed things a bit this time, and crawlers have unlimited storage in a dimensional inventory. And he warns Carl not to put living things in there because they'll immediately die, which is good to know. And the inventory is time-locked, so food won't go bad. Apparently people starving to death is just as bad for ratings as no bathrooms is. Morty gives Carl a healing potion, which specifically states that it doesn't heal shit like, and I quote, succubus-inflicted gonorrhea, so remember to wrap it up, bucko. Apparently, succubus-inflicted STIs require something a bit more specialized than your standard healing potion. Then they go through Carl's notifications to look at his achievements, which include but are not limited to inflicting damage on a mob, killing a mob who probably had a family, and killing a mob with your bare hands, which is, and I quote, kind of fucked up. There's also some talk of podophilia, pugilism, and a pretty well-placed your mom joke. And then bloop blorp, Carl has leveled up. Ding level 2. Grats, Carl. Morty specifies that there are other safe spaces in the dungeon that aren't guild halls, and those spaces will still show on the map, even when the areas are otherwise obscured by the so-called fog of war. They brought it up and explained what it is, so I assume that's going to end up being important later on, even though it's a pretty standard feature of video game maps. Like any kind of open world exploration game map, you're going to have shit that's clouded over until you go and explore that area. So that's pretty standard shit. Apparently, the aliens, while observing the culture, were also like keeping way up to date on video games and how that shit works. So then they crack open Carl's loot boxes. It includes items such as pet food, a couple healing potions, a couple items that could be used for bludgeoning damage but aren't really weapons, strictly speaking, some torches, some dynamite, a goblin pass, whatever the fuck that is, that turned into a fucking brand on Carl's arm and on his jacket, an enchanted cloak, an enchanted shirt, and an enchanted toe ring. No pants, no shoes, just a bunch of crap, a couple potentially decent pieces, and a toe ring. And I feel like Matt Dinniman has absolutely played MPorgs before. Like, this dude has absolutely played, like, EverQuest and World of Warcraft and shit like that, where you start out with Dick, and all the stuff that drops off of mobs is, like, basically garbage. So, yeah, I feel like he's one of us. He gets it. Then they open up the legendary pet box, and Morty recommended that Carl feed Donut the enchanted pet biscuit while he was in the guild hall because, while there is a pretty good chance that the result will be good or neutral, If the result is bad, whatever Donut becomes won't be able to hurt him in there, and she'll just be ported out of the dungeon. Carl doesn't think she'll eat it because she puts the princess in picky princess bitch, apparently, but she jumps up and snatches that shit right out of his hand and immediately turns into a pile of goo with a waiting message over her. And Morty says that since she didn't get ported out, it's not a negative result, and it'll take 5 to 10 minutes for whatever this transformation is to be complete. Way to end this shit on a cliffhanger, Matt. So, yeah, that's chapter 5. There's some real good nuggets in here. Your mom joke. Excellent. Apparently you can bang a succubus and potentially get an STI from them. So that's good information to have. Standard map stuff with the fog of war. Like, that isn't anything really, groundbreaking. And yeah, then he has a bunch of crap in his inventory that isn't particularly helpful. But it is good to know that he's not dealing with the like limited space in your inventory bullshit and the fucking mechanic of being overburdened and shit like that. Like, I just got pulled back into playing World of Warcraft with my best friend Laura, who I have mentioned before in this video. And like, we decided to play Alliance instead of Horde for the first time ever. And we're both night elves, I guess. They are night elves. And so we're like running around and we're killing stuff, and our like 12 slot inventory is getting full so fast. So it's like we have to continually run back and sell our shit so we have more space. And then of course it's WoW Classic. So all of the stuff that they did to like in later versions of World of Warcraft that they did to make gameplay like less of a slog, none of that is there. This is like original vanilla World of Warcraft without any of the other stuff. So, we have to run back, sell all of our shit, then go back. And of course, we don't really have that much money and we don't have the ability to make anything yet. And so we just have to deal with having no space in our inventory. So I like that they're not dealing with that mechanic. And I'm trying to think of what game it was that I used to play. It might have been Dark Age of Camelot, which was a really excellent import that I played with my ex-husband, and we like ended up meeting up with a bunch of really cool people in the game and like made our own guild, and it was super fun. And I think it might have been in Dark Age of Camelot where you could actually be overburdened. So there was like a weight limit, and if you got to a certain weight limit, regardless of how many items were in your inventory, like your character would say, I am overburdened, and would move more slowly. So I'm glad we're not dealing with one of those kinds of mechanics, because that would just be a drag. Although I imagine that with strength of 6, his ability to cart a lot of stuff around would be pretty good. But in any event, yeah, it kind of killed me to stop at the end of chapter 5, because I really want to know what's going to happen with Princess Donut. I've worked really hard to avoid spoilers, and I think I've done a pretty good job, but I do know, like, I've picked up enough sort of in the general zeitgeist to know that Princess Donut is beloved. And so I assume that something awesome is going to happen with her. And I also found out that there's somebody called Rawl the Jizz Crab. So I have that to look forward to, which I'm very excited about. And so, yeah, it was really hard to stop at the end of chapter 5 when I was finishing this up, because I really wanted to know what was going to happen to Donut. So in any event, so far, really liking this book. I think that it's really fun. I think that the premise is interesting and kind of unique. I like that the author seems to be in my age bracket, which is always fun, because that means that I understand cultural references, which makes me feel less old. And yeah, I can't wait to read the rest of this. And so, yeah, let me know what you think about these chapters down in the comments, and let's have a little chat about it. Let's talk about it. I guess that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much for stopping by. Until next time, stay hydrated, and, I guess it's a toss-up whether you want to be in or out of the building when it flattens in an alien apocalypse. So